Was there a moment when you stopped seeing yourself as a convict and started seeing yourself as someone who had been through conviction?
It's not about my past, it's not about what I was, it's about who I am and what I can continue to bring to people in this world.
Former motocross racer, convicted felon, now CEO of Move Performance, Chad Dunn is proof that reinvention can be louder than reputation.
I hear these two guys talking that they're going to cut my throat and they're going to take me in a car and they're going to kill me, and I'm a convicted felon. I smoked crack, I've got 6 DUIs, and here I am, I'm still leading the world.
You can't control what's around you, but you can control how you respond.
Life is easy, but it's amazing how complicated we make it.
Was there a moment when you stopped seeing yourself as a convict and started seeing yourself as someone who had been through conviction?
Yes, being released from prison, there was a lot of soul searching, and you had to get back to the environment. You had to get back to, they call it, life on the streets. Initially, I held all that weight in my back. I didn't let nobody know. When I went back to work the next day, the first day I got out of prison, I went right back to work at the same place, with my buddies and doing the career that I was at with physical therapy. But nobody knew, except for myself, my family, my close people. And when I opened up Move Human Performance Center in 2017 and started to venture out on my own and continued to create my own identity, it wasn't until I was approached by one of my great school friends. His name was Brandon Meon. He has a podcast called Make the Difference. And he said, "Chad, I want you to tell your story." And it was different, because I haven't said nothing before, but he knew, and he knew everything about it. He knew who I was. He knows who I am. And I went to my wife, Jackie, and I said, "Honey, Brandon wants me to open up and tell my story." And she says, "I don't know if you do that, do not mention Move, because of the kids that we train, the people, obviously the stigma of being a convicted felon, and being a business owner, of just opening up, it's going to be difficult. So you had to protect yourself." And it was all for protection. Nothing because I was never the victim, and I'm never afraid of what I am or who I am now. But again, it was just it was strategic. I just didn't say nothing. So when he did that, I was able to go to the podcast. I did the podcast. It was whatever, I think it was 2020, I think it was, when I did the podcast with him. I told my story. I left that day and I felt like I was 100 pounds weightless. I got some weight off my back. I went home. I played the episode for my wife, and she said, "Man, this is great. Everybody got to hear your story." So at that moment, that was really when I figured out, this is really what my whole thing about. It's not about my past. It's not about what I was. It's about who I am and what I can continue to bring to people in this world.
In your response, you mentioned identity. How did you separate who you are from what happened to you? And what did that process teach you about your identity?
Well, the biggest thing nowadays, I think, in this world and in the environment that we live in, is that people don't want to be the real self. In chapter 1 of my book that I have coming out here on the 28th of October, chapter 1 is self-identity. The best thing is to know thyself, and to know yourself. I've always been a great person. I've always been an entertainer. I've always been fun. I've always been energetic. But sometimes that led me into bad situations. I learned through curiosity. And that was one of my best teaching tools I have. I learned through curiosity. I'm willing to get into things because I know I'm power enough to get out of it as well. I've been through drug dealing. I've been through drug using. I've opened up a business. I've been through COVID as a small business owner. There's not one thing that I cannot do. It's just because I put a plan together, and that's one of the things that happens. You put a plan together and you'll know who you are. And people nowadays, when they ask me who I am, I prepare for that question, because most people can't answer it. And I've asked that question about the last 8 weeks as I'm getting ready for my book launch. I've asked that question. I'll go up to somebody and say, "Tell me a little something about yourself." And they can't answer it. A, because they don't want to. B, because they're intimidated to really tell the truth of who they are. Or C, they just don't know, And so when somebody comes up to me now and they say, "So tell me a little bit of something about yourself," I tell them, I'm a 51-year-old male business owner. I own a Move Human Performance Center. I'm a convicted felon. I've smoked crack. I've got 6 DUIs. And here I am. I'm still leading the world. All right? I'm making a better person for myself and for other people. And why is that? Because I've done it. I've made these comebacks.
It's very apparent from your response that you have a lot of belief in yourself and a lot of belief in other people right now. Who believed in you before you believed in yourself?
Well, my parents have always believed in me. I come, and as I do these podcasts and I've talked to people, the first thing that people ask me, they say, so how was your childhood? How was your childhood? I mean, obviously, like you said, you went through a reckless life of drinking and driving. You were on the streets in South Phoenix. You were selling drugs. You lived also in the glitzy area of Camelback in Scottsdale, Arizona. So you've been on all sides of life. But my parents are the ones. They're still together. They've set a good example. My mom and dad have never done drugs in their life. My dad was from Colorado. My mom's from Colorado. That's where I grew up at. They're very supportive of everything I did. Now I look back at it though. And as parents, what they were doing was try to keep me away from trouble, right? And that was away from jail. They knew I'd be fine on the streets, but nobody wants to see somebody sit in jail or nobody wants to see somebody go to prison. So what they thought was love and and again, it was all love, but for me, I saw enabled. So again, I took advantage of it, just as a kid would do. If I was able to get in trouble and I'm able to get out of it, it's a lot different. So my parents definitely were the ones that really helped me out at the beginning, and they're of what I was doing and everything, they're my support system. And then along came Jackie. And Jackie, my wife, and right there, I knew from day one, I told her day one, I said, I'm going to marry you. I'm going to marry you. And she told me to get in line. She was a bartender. I'm not supposed to be drinking, but I met her at a bar. Right? For 8 months, I asked her out on a date. I asked her out on a date for 8 months, and she turned me down for 8 months. Right? But I was persistent. I know what I want. I'm and again, I got belief in myself. I told her day one I was going to marry her, and sure enough, here we are 20 years later, we're married. She is my support system, and even to this day, she's the one that pushes me to write my book. She's the one that pushes me to go to work every day with a better goal on my hand. I've got a new grandson, almost 5 months old grandson. So again, I'm pushed by the people that are behind me, and those are, again, people that I've helped and people I know that can help me.
What is something, speaking of people, what is something people misunderstand about your story?
I don't know if really anybody misunderstands it, because they've always asked me, or now they ask me that the story was out, and a lot more is coming out here, the 28th, but I'm not afraid to talk about it. Like I said, I was never the victim, and I think that's one of the biggest things that people look at, through the trials that I've been through, the drug usage, the trim, going to prison. That's just what about prison? What was it, And to be honest with you, is that I was never the victim. Never the victim. And so when people hear that, they're shocking, because in this world nowadays, it's always somebody else's fault. It was addiction. I don't believe in addiction. I don't use that word in my vocabulary, because when I got out of prison, I had to go to one more class, and it was an alcohol class that I had to go to get released as just part of the whole system. And the counselor that I had there, he says, you're not going to hear me say the word addiction. He says, you're going to hear me say the word choices, and y'all make bad choices. That's why we get in trouble. And at that point in time, I'm like, man, life is easy. Life is easy. I always thought, because people put a label on me, that I was an addict or I was an alcoholic, or you're a convicted felon. I knew right then that this is not it. It's going to be choices. And I got a tattoo on my side that says, believe only half of what you hear and all of what you see. 62% of people return to prison. Not me. I'll be the other side of the statistic.
Alchemist, my one request before we get into this first segment, it would mean everything to me. You head over to our YouTube channel and subscribe. Mm-hmm. Growing the channel enables me to bring on incredible guests like Chad and continue delivering the best show I can for you.
3, 2, 1.
Rooted in wisdom, driven by purpose, Grounded Moments is all about our values. And there's no better way to see what we truly stand for than to play a game, Chad. This game is called Principle or Preference. I'm going to give you a scenario or a statement, and you just have to tell me if it's a principle, something core to you truly believe in that everyone should do, or if it's a preference, which means it's okay if not everybody takes it on. Make sense?
Got it.
It is rapid fire. There is no time for explanations or to justify your answer. Principle or preference, second chances should be earned, not given.
No, I think that's your principle. Pain, I think everybody should be given a second chance.
Pain is a better teacher than success.
That's your principle.
Discipline beats motivation every time.
Principle.
Forgiveness starts with yourself.
Principle.
Competition brings out character, not ego.
Principle.
You can't lead others until you've faced your own demons.
Principle.
Freedom is more mental than physical.
That's principle.
Grit matters more than grace.
Principle.
Redemption requires accountability.
That's principle.
And fear can be fuel.
Yep, that's principle.
Hey, and that
Oh, I
was
like
the
it.
first round I ever played, Chad, where every single answer was a principle. And
Yeah.
you know what? I'm not one to chime in on if I agree or disagree with people's principle or preferences, but I agree with you on every single thing. Those are all core principles to everyone. With that, what I want to know is... Sorry, go ahead, Chad.
No, go ahead. No, you good, Tyler. We go.
I want to hear your story you were going to tell.
When you talk about the principles with all that, it goes back and we talked about self-identity earlier, and really that's really the physical aspect of who you are. But then what it actually goes back into also is your values and your beliefs, and a lot of those questions that you asked there is that if people haven't been put in the position that I was, where my freedom was taken away from me, or I've overcome these aspects, they might say that'd be more of a different variation, but it's not true. That's not true. When you live these situations, those phrases you just mentioned right there, they have a greater meaning.
Absolutely. And, we talked about identity, and in our intro, we talked a little bit about how when you left federal prison, you returned back to your job. I'd like to play one more game with you here in this segment, and where I am going to guess the very first paying job you ever had. I don't want you to tell me. I'm going to put 2 minutes on the clock, and all I can do is ask yes or no questions. Are you ready to give it a try?
Okay.
All right.
Go for it.
2 minutes to guess your very first career. Yes or no questions starting right now. I have to start with the elephant in the room. Was it a legal job?
Now, is it career or job? What do we go
First
for?
job,
Career?
very first job.
Or just job?
Yeah.
For my first job. Okay, I go for it. Yep. Was it illegal? No.
No, it was not illegal. Okay. Was safety a part of your... Did you wear safety gear?
Yes. We had to wear safety gear.
Were you required to work with your hands?
Yes.
Okay. Was your boss physically present or not really seen?
Not really seen.
Okay. Was it an hourly wage?
Yes.
Was it labor intensive?
Yes.
Did it involve minerals?
No. Well,
okay.
Yeah, you could say it. Yeah, you could say it. Yeah, you could say it did.
It did involve minerals. Was it like a food service of some kind?
No.
No. Okay. Was it like the oil industry?
No.
No. Okay. What did we call it? Like a trades, like mechanic, welder, carpenter.
Yeah, it could be a trade.
It could be a trade. Okay. Did it involve like metal, like sheet metal?
No.
No. Okay. Oh man. Were you a teenager when you did this job?
Yes.
Okay. Could teenagers today still do this job?
Sure.
Okay. Were you like an assistant for a journeyman?
Yeah.
You were. Okay. That's my 2 minutes. My time's up. I can't go any further. I am curious. What was your first job, Chad?
Construction.
Construction.
Yeah. So I was a laborer on it. Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
thinking.
You were close with the journey. I was a laborer on a construction.
Very cool.
Yeah, because my dad worked for a construction company, so I got a job working for him. Matter of fact, is when Arizona had its record for, I think it was 127 degrees out here. We were putting down asphalt, which for the road construction, which that kind of goes back into the minerals because it was dealing with rocks and oils and all that stuff. So that's where I came back. So I was out there, and that day I went home. I said, "Dad, I'm not doing this." And I was a senior in high school. I said, "I'm not doing this. This is hot as shit out here." He says, "If there's one thing I taught you," he said, "go use your brains and not your bronze." Right. So that's kind of another reason I went to ASU and I started going to school and I went into the therapy aspect.
So you kind of touched
Construction
on
not
it
a bad job
here.
though. I love it.
You kind of touched on it here. What did that first job teach you about leadership?
Well, being the labor guy, you're at the bottom end of the pole. you know. But at the same time too, is that you're important. If you don't do your job, then the top jobs can't get done. So when we were doing rubberized asphalt, or when we were doing ditches, and I did underground pipe sewer stuff, safety first. Safety first was everything. But more importantly, I think it taught me how to show up early. I've always been a hard worker. Construction out here starts early morning, 4:30 in the summer times, whatever, get done early. But it taught me hard work. It taught me hard work. And that's one of the things, my dad's a construction guy, So hard work is one of those things that if there's a job to be done, you got to do it, And not necessarily is there a certain way that it has to be done. I'm going to ask you to do something, and can you do it? That's what it is, And so construction is kind of those things. You have a blueprint, you have the plans and all that. But at the same time, you still have to be able to do the application, and that's what I look at with life now too. It's kind of the same thing as we're building. We're all artists. We're a blank piece of paper when I got out of prison, and now we're all artists, and we're creating the life that we want to live.
Chad, have you heard of an elevator pitch before?
I have not. Yes, I have.
The general idea of you get about 15 to 30 seconds to pitch an idea or try to convince somebody something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I want you to take the message that you're trying to tell us right now, this idea of your identity, you shape who you are, and I want you to condense it to a 15 to 30 second elevator pitch to my audience. You ready to give it your best shot?
Sure.
All right, whenever you're ready.
Starting off, I think that we've looked for all the self-help in all these classes. We've looked at it for certain programs. And so what I'm trying to pitch to somebody is the ability to regain control of yourself and regain control of your own life, but through making the best choices that you can and becoming the real person that you can by knowing who you are, right? And so at the end of the day, it's not about the programs. It's hard to do those when you've looked for all the self-help, but the self-help is within inside you.
Speaking of that need of self-help, that's when people push through hard times and we get into adversity, and that's going to bring us to our air element, and we're going to get into headwinds and tailwinds. In headwinds and tailwinds, we get down to the mistakes we've made and what was in the aftermath to learn. And to get into the comfort zone of mistakes, Chad, we're going to play another game. Adversity doesn't wait, so neither can you. Welcome to the hot seat. Quick adversity, quicker answers. I'm going to give you some real world challenges leaders face, and you've got 10 seconds or less to give me your first move. Are you ready?
Got it.
Okay, you wipe out mid-race with the cameras rolling. What's your first thought?
Get up.
You're rebuilding your reputation, and someone brings up your past. How do you respond?
Truthfully.
A friend from your old life tempts you back to bad habits. What's your move?
Tends me back to bad habits?
Yeah.
Disengage from him.
A young rider looks up to you, but copies your mistakes. What do you do?
Educate him.
You feel the fear of failure creeping in right before a big opportunity. How do you snap out of it?
Become an inner coach instead of an inner critic.
A team member doubts your comeback. What's your first message to them?
Show them.
You've got one shot to tell your story to a crowd that's already judged you. How do you start?
Right at the beginning, truthfully.
You realize your success is triggering others' resentment. How do you respond to that?
They all got feelings.
And there we go. I totally agree with you again. I want to know, Chad, what is something you had to unlearn?
Unlearn. I think my biggest thing for me, that sometimes your DNA, and again, alcohol was my big problem. Like I said, I got 6 DUIs, and it was all for entertainment purposes. And so with the substance abuse and everything that went on, it was all through alcohol. And so I had to teach myself that it was not necessary for me to have. It was not necessary to do. I didn't need it to do what I wanted to do in life. And so, like I said, when I met Jackie, she was a sober bartender. I'm like, how could you ever meet a sober bartender, somebody that lives in that environment, Or it's possible to be in that environment and not be one of the ones that are under the influence. And so one of the things I had to unlearn is that, hey, you can walk away from that, which again, I'm not tied to anything because I know I can leave it.
How did you overcome some of your biggest setbacks?
Keep going. keep going, and educate yourself. You got to complete the terms, so obviously getting in trouble and having to do, minor stays in jail and those, but you knew the bright side. You knew you were going to come out of those, going to prison when I was getting sentenced. I got arrested. The first thing was getting arrested and not even knowing where I was going, because since it was a federal case, they took me from Arizona. I went to go see the judge. They boarded me on a plane, flew me to Oklahoma City, so the major federal transfer center is in Oklahoma City. We went to go see a judge there. The next thing I know, I was put on a plane. I was sent to Riverside, California for San Bernardino. And then when we were getting ready to, I think we were there for another week, I boarded a plane. They sent me over to Hawaii. So it was for like 8 weeks before I actually got to understand what was going on. But that taught me a lot about patience, because in the system it's hurry up and wait, hurry up and wait, hurry up and wait. We know it has to be done, but again, there's commands, there's change, there's a whole process that has to be done. And so with that, my life on the streets, I've become a more patient guy. Nothing gets to me. I don't stress about nothing. If I cannot physically change it, or or change the positive or negative side at all, it doesn't bother me. And that's just all through trial and error. You have to slow down and become very thoughtful. You have to think about every choice that you make.
What made it a federal case?
I brought money back from Hawaii to Arizona, so since it crossed the state lines, there was a federal case that was involved.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you for sharing. We're gonna, you're
Yeah.
really good, Chad, at taking adversity and instantly reframing it into something positive, and that's actually a very good skill, because people struggle to do that. How do you make that so natural to you to just say, I just keep going?
I live with optimism. And I think the world that we're in now, and I think the things that we have with social media and the things that we're influenced, I'm not trying to be a social media influencer. I'm trying to inspire you, I'm not going to be able to do that being a pessimistic person or putting myself in a pessimistic situation. And so one of the things, I wake up every morning, I have a goal, something that I want to do for myself, something I want to do for my future. I am optimistic that it's going to be a great day. My wife, she said, Chad, you're the only person I know that ever says that they have a great day every day. Now that she works with me, she sees that it is true. There are bad moments. We hear that there are bad moments to my day, but at the end of the day, when I go to bed, I know that the greatest day that I have here is better than any day that I've ever had incarcerated. Right? I'm optimistic.
Now, there are so many people in the world, and people even that listen to this show, that aren't optimistic in that sense. What is one thing they can do to start bringing about some optimism?
Well, my method that I use to help anything, it starts with one in a row, and that's my whole method, is one in a row. I had a great basketball coach, and I take things from sport, and I take things from coaching, and I take it to life. Everything, success starts with one in a row. You have to make one basket in a row to become a great basketball shooter, right? And so when I did that, when I got to prison, it was one day in a row. It's not going to be. It's an unfamiliar territory. It's an unforeseen ground. I don't know what this is all about. But you have to learn. Right? And so I was willing to learn. I was willing to open up my horizon. I was able to broaden everything that I see, and not just want to be. Remember, I learned everything in the streets. Right? I could learn everything in prison. I learned what I had to do through sports. Right? I will learn, but again, you had to be available to learn. A lot of people, they lose the battle before the battle's already won. They already have, and when I talk about it, is that it's going to take a series of small battles to win this victory, But a lot of people, they lost before they even got started, So you have to be optimistic that you can do this. You have to give yourself faith, and you have to start with that first day. You get the first day done, number 2, number 3 comes easy, because you're continuing to do one in a row.
Now, I'm going to assume one in a row is a theme in the book that you have coming out. I'm hoping you can share a little bit here about this book and what we can expect from it.
Yeah, the book's 10 codes of transformation. And I got through 10 chapters. Each chapter is a great lesson that somebody can use. You've tried every self-help, like I mentioned, that's out there. You've gone to classes, but these are codes for yourself. These are codes for yourself, to where you have to quiet the noise, And the noise is not just external. There's a lot of noise internal that you have to quiet. And so by doing that, I take you through processes of what I've gone through in my life and how I've got out of it. I give you little sound bites. And I think it's simple, right? I think it's very simple, because at the end of the day, it boils back to you. Either you want it or you don't. It's either yes or no. And that leads me to chapter 2. Chapter 2 is your choices. It's yes or no. Everybody sees the glass half empty, or everybody sees the glass half full. I see the glass overflowing.
What a great outlook there, Chad. I'm curious. We're on the air element. We're talking adversity. Where have you found adversity to be more difficult? Your time in incarceration or your time outside of incarceration?
I think more of adversity. The hardest part about it is the time spent in the hood. Being a drug dealer and being a drug user. Because your shit might get taken, or you might not be able to get something. You might have money, you might not. Your drug dealer might be out and you can't get it. So how you had to. I worked a lot harder being a drug dealer and being a drug user than I ever have being an owner. Right? Life is easy, but it's amazing how complicated we make it. The adversities right now, I don't know if they're really adversities that I have because everything's planned. The only adversity that I really had was, like I said, and even prison. Prison was a plan, right? Go in there day one and get out. So there really was no adversities even in prison because I had a good system. I had a good plan when I was in there. I wasn't going to go in there and just be a knucklehead. I wasn't going in there to cause trouble. I wasn't going in there to involve any gangs. I was going in there to do my time. I met a couple of great people that helped lead me the way, my dear friend Robbie. And so even then, I don't really know if that was adversity. The only time about prison was adversity was when my wife and I, she said there was a time that we might not have to be together because it was hard. She would come up to visit me and she'd have to leave me. And we weren't married at this time. We were just, dating. But it was one of those things is like, well, hey, now your relationship is separated. It could have folded me. But again, staying optimistic and knowing what my goal was, either my life with Jackie or my life without Jackie was going to be better when I got out. And again, I think the real adversity is living in the hood and doing the games and living the life of the illegal life. It is so hard to look over your shoulder every day. It is so hard to work 24 hours a day to score the next high or whatever. Or it's hard to even just make sure you got these drug deals and you don't get busted. So either which way you go, that's the hard life. When you do what you're supposed to do, life's really easy and you don't face much adversity.
I've got some follow-up questions about change, but we'll save those for our water element. I want to play one last game before we move on to our third segment here. We're going to take the toughest challenges leaders face and flip them into power. This is called Flip the Script, where I'm going to share a negative belief about adversity, and you're so good with that optimistic lens. I'm going to give you 20 seconds to flip it into an empowering reframe. Are you ready to try?
Go for it.
Okay. So we're going to reframe these. Once you've messed up, people never forget.
That's not true. Once you mess up, make sure you let people know that it was just a message and that you're going to learn from it.
You can't change what's already broken.
No, you can definitely change what's already broken. Anything's repairable.
Tough love means shutting down emotion.
Now, a tough love is shutting down emotion. That's a sign of weakness. Tough love is a strength.
Some people just aren't built for success.
Everybody built for success. It's just that. Do you see it within yourself?
And if you fall once, you'll fall again.
You will fall again, and you're going to keep falling again. You're going to fall again. It's not how many times you fall. It's how many times you get up.
Love that. We're going to start to talk about how we action this adversity into change, and we're going to go into our third segment, our water element, on ripples of change. In Ripples of Change, we discover how to make a lasting impact. Leaders don't need more theory, they need more solutions. So we're going to go through some quick tips here. I'm going to give you a leadership scenario, and I want your quickest tip, your sharpest piece of advice that you can give anyone, okay?
Perfect.
What's one thing that you do when you feel old habits creeping back?
Silence. You got to sit in silence, okay? When everybody feels like they're going backwards, they learn in reverse, or they think they're going reverse. And so I always ask everybody, if you feel like you're going backwards, what do you have to do? And she said, well, everyone says you got to put it in drive. You got to go forward. And I say, that's not true. There's always a neutral. You got to go to neutral before you go to drive.
What's the fastest way to reset your mindset after a setback?
The fastest way to reset mindset is breathe. Just breathe. Breathing is the biggest thing that people don't do. When you can breathe, you can control your heart rate. You can control your heart rate. You can control your thinking.
What's one tip for rebuilding trust with someone who doubts you?
Be real. Be real, right? Do what's right. Say what's right, and be real.
What's the quickest way to channel adrenaline into focus instead of chaos?
For me, I take it, it's kind of the same thing. Don't look at it as fearful. I always look at it as focus. So I take fear, turn it into focus.
And what's your top advice for anyone trying to rebuild after a major fall?
Believe. You have to believe.
So we talked a little bit about your story, the incarceration, the time spent being in the hood, being the toughest piece of your adversity. So I want to talk about change here. How did you get out of the hood?
Well, I know exactly. Last time I was in the hood as a drug dealer, at that aspect of using the cocaine and the crack and everything that I was doing, I was taking these two kids and two guys, and we were going to go do a beer run, and they were sitting in the back seat of my car. I was driving, and obviously I speak Spanish enough to get by and enough to know everything. And in the back, I hear these two guys talking that they're going to cut my throat and they're going to take me a car and they're going to kill me and they're going to take off. They were saying it in Spanish. I interpreted, I understood it. And so at that point in time, we were on our way to a 7-Eleven over here, and I bought some time. I was moving my hat around. I was changing my rear view mirror, and I was just distracted. I was trying to just buy time. As soon as I got over to the side, we parked in backwards on the side, and we had a plan. As soon as I pulled into the parking lot, I parked in backwards. They got out of my car. They ran inside like they were going to go get the beer and the cigarettes and steal it all. And I got up and I took my ass out of there. And I've never been back to the hood from that time on.
And since then, there's been no crossing paths of any sort?
There's no crossing paths of any sort. Nope.
Good for you, and congratulations for removing yourself from that situation. I think that's a big, bold decision, and thankful that you could hear them. Now, being in that situation, when you left, obviously there was an internal thought that said something needs to change. So what steps did you take to actually start changing?
Well, at that point in time, I left and I started doing, again, I was in the mix of doing everything, obviously. So I got back into doing construction again, And so I said, man, it's time to change. So I went back. I was doing some construction. I didn't have to worry about going back there and utilizing drugs. And that was a thing in my past. Towards the tail end of my construction job out in Arizona, it got hot. And so they said, we have to continue our work in the summer. We're going to send you to California. So they sent me to Oakland, California, home of the rock, right? It was within 2 days I went and found it over there. So again, not just because they put me in a new environment, or I even put myself in a new environment, I went looking for it again, right? And so I wasn't ready. I knew I didn't want to go back to the south side where I was at over here because there was issues of what could have happened. But at the same time, though, is that I went and found it somewhere else, And so just even relocating scenarios or just relocating environments is not enough to make that change. I had to want it. And so when I got back into doing different work, I got burned. I had a hand burn, so that's why I work with a lot of burn survivors right now. I was working on a crew. We had an oil pipe blow up, and so it burned my hand. I had to come back out here. And at that point in time, it was like, you know what? Something's got to change. So I started trading. I started going back into the trading. And then, again, everything going good. Selling water. I was selling water for a company that was out here because we had an owner that was he used to run the health clubs, And so he came to me and said, Chad, I need some help. You're one of our good salespeople, which, again, I'm a great salesperson. I love all that. Sales is my major thing. He said, I need help selling some water. We're just opening up this new water company. And I thought, how hard is it could be to sell water in a desert, right? It's got to be easy. So I was selling water. I had an opportunity to do that. And then my high school friends came back. And these are people that we always still kind of see here and there, And that's when they had, they were taking some drugs from Arizona, sending it over to Hawaii. And next thing you know, this enterprise happened. It was not on the south side. It wasn't where I used to be and whatever. This is high school friends. And next thing you know, I was asked to bring back some money. Again, working. I was doing stuff I was supposed to be doing. And next thing you know, boom, you get arrested.
Now, with that, there has to be some skills that were transferable from your time as a drug dealer to the skills you're doing now. What skills did you actually develop there? And did you take anything from that and start applying it to what you're doing now?
Yeah. Drug dealers are great salespeople. They are great salespeople. They can talk to anybody and they talk to everybody, and that's really what I do now. I've got to talk to CEOs every day. I talk to professional athletes every day, and I also got to talk to a 10-year-old kid that might be hurt for therapy. So you have to know that your audience, and I think that's one of the things is that I was able to do when I was selling drugs is I put on a new identity. I put on a new uniform, right? And so I was the white kid that went to the South Side. I spoke Spanish. And so you have to know your audience, and so what it taught me a lot of sales. At the same time though is that my hard work from my father and everything that I was always had earlier is that I'm a hard worker. I'm gonna show up. That's what made me the best drug dealer is I was available 24/7, right? I had long shifts. I didn't care if I needed to make money, and again, money's not everything, and that's when it came to an end, and right now what I want to make is I want to make my future. And that's the difference. It's not about the money; it's about your future. And that's one of the things that drug dealing did is that there's no future in drug dealing. There is not. And so one of the things it did is it taught me if you want to have a future, you got to do something that's productive. You have to do something that's legit, and you have to do something that's going to be helpful. And here we are.
Speaking of the future, that brings about decision making and the process behind it. It's going to lead us into our final segment, our fire element, and we're going to get into spark or burn. Where we talk about events that spark success or burn lessons into our memories. When every decision matters, you only get to pick one. We're going to get your final answer here. I'm going to give you two tough options and no explanations, no backing out, just your final answer on which one you would rather. Okay?
Okay.
Win the race or finish with integrity.
Finish with integrity.
Freedom or forgiveness.
Freedom.
Lead the pack or lift others behind you.
Lift others behind me.
Prove them wrong or prove yourself right.
Prove myself right.
Pain or peace.
I'm gonna say pain.
Okay. Fame for a moment or impact for a lifetime.
Impact for a lifetime.
Never crash again or never fear again.
Never crash again.
Speak your truth or protect your privacy.
No, speak the truth.
Control your path or trust the process.
I'm gonna say trust the process.
And legacy or liberation.
Legacy.
Now I have to ask, we don't normally explain our answers, but everybody listening is going to be wondering, Chad, why pain?
I think pain's the best teacher. Pain's the best teacher. And right now is that with this generation as parents, and as we raise people around us, we're trying to keep them out of stressful situations, and with stressful situations, we're trying to not put them into painful situations. So, stress and pain, those two things hurt. And by doing that, I think that we're creating a weak culture. I think that we're creating weak people. I think that you have to endure some pain to be able to grow from it, And so that pain is going to have to be a teacher. I see it with clients. I see it with kids. I even see, I think you did a podcast here just a little recently. They were talking about skill. She was talking about skill. And, from the coaching side is that we have coaches for sports performance, for stretching, for yoga, for tie your shoe, for getting dressed. We have coaches for everything nowadays. And these kids, I think they're very skilled. I think everybody's very skilled. We have business coaches. So I think the skill is there. I think the missing component is the thinking. Because the more that we have people do something, or the more coaches that we have, we don't want to take credibility for what we do. I need to be told what to do, and I think that's what comes along with our life is that we had to be told what to do. I lived it in prison. I was told what to do. That's not the way we have to live. You have to think. And I think that comes back into optimism when we talk about it all. Is that when you're thinking, you're in command. And one of the questions you just had me was about control, and I don't know if you ever really can control, because I can't control things, and I try to control not getting in trouble when I was doing stuff in the streets. I can try to control not going to prison, but I ended up there, and there's one thing is that when I left there, I don't know if I really could control if I could get back there. I could be around somebody that might do something stupid, I go back there. But I think I take the word out, and I do take the word out, control, and I put in the word command. I don't ever know if you're really ever in control. But if you're always in command, there's one person you can be in command of, and that's yourself, you know. And as long as you know if you're in command, I think you'll have a better chance of having more control, but I don't know if you're ever in control, because we can't control what other people do around us. We can't control what the opponent does. You know, there's another side to it. It's the yin and the yang. It's the earth and the wind. You know, we're gonna have that. It's gonna come around. So you always have to be in command.
One of the things that I always tell people is you can't control what's around you, but you can control how you respond. And there's a difference between controlling how you respond and being in control. So I really like the contrast you put between the word control and command there. I want to have another contrast here. How do you separate your emotion from your logic?
You know, I'm a thinker. I'm a big thinker, you know, and I take time, you know. And one of the things is speaking to some of the attorneys I had back in the day, they said, Chad, you got slow ears. And I said, what do you mean? They said, you don't listen before you speak, right? And I thought, well, that's good. So I slowed down now, you know, and you have to process this stuff, you know. Whatever something's happened, you have to process it. And the more you process it, the better off everything is.
Now, Chad, one of the things that we've talked about, and the theme of this show is the identity and the belief in yourself. How do you make sure that your values show up in the choices you make?
I've got my story. I have 120 hours of tattoos on my upper body. I had no tattoos when I went into prison. I've got my whole upper body tattooed now. And it's my whole story. I wear it on me every day, right? And the reason why it's there is because it's a reminder. These are my scars. You know, when I work with my burn people and they're worried about their identity, they're worried about their appearance, they're worried about what they look like. I wonder if people's going to be looking at me because of my scars on my arms or my face or whatever. But scars tell a story, you know, and that's what my tattoos are. I tell them I've got tattoos on my arm, and the reason why I did those is because I wanted scars also, you know. And so every scar tells a story. So if they look at me, some people might not like tattoos, you know, and people might look at me differently. Again, I know what they're feeling. I know what they're going through, you know. And at the end of the day, though, is that when you're ready to tell your story like I am now and like they were going to be in the future, you know, hey, then you're going to be able to help people. And that's what it's all about, is a great mentorship of other people and building a better community.
Chad, one of the things that has started on this show is my last guest that I've interviewed leaves a question for my next guest, not knowing who they are, what they bring. The question that was left for you, what legacy do you want to leave behind, and what change needs to happen?
The legacy that I want to leave behind is that, you know, with the world, and we talk about mental illness, we talk about addictions, you know, we talk about all these things, and we've been studying this for years. We've had a lot of programs that are available for that. You know, I look at these school shootings, I look at all the violence that goes around down there, and what I want to leave with everybody is it's not about getting the head better. We're focusing on the wrong problem. We got to get the heart better. And I think when we work to get to people's hearts more, and I think that we get them to understand compassion a little bit more, not just for everybody around them, but again, that starts with compassion for yourself. You know, and we talked about it. You know, I asked people, I said, do you know who your soulmate is? And people look around and they say, no, I'm still looking for him, or I'm still looking for her. And I said, what if I tell you that your soulmate could be your biggest hater, right? Who's your soulmate? Your soulmate's you. Your soulmate's you. And most people don't know that, right? Most people don't see that. And so when you learn to love yourself and you learn to love others around you, I think we're going to have a better place for compassion. I think we're going to have a better generation of people coming up. And so my legacy, I got, like I said, I got my 4-month-old grandson right now. My book's dedicated to him, and it talks about, you know, building it one brick in a row, one in a row, one in a row, one in a row. But at the end of the day, really, is what I'm right now is I'm developing his heart, you know. And I think the legacy I want for him is, and I want him to carry it on, is just, man, Chad was a guy of compassion. He had a big heart, and he'll help anybody around him.
I can't wait for this episode to air and people to hear that message. It's a powerful one. Chad, I have an interview with my next guest in 4 days from now. You don't know who they are, what we're going to talk about, the theme of their story. What question do you want to leave for them?
What question do I want to leave for them? Let's see here. Let's see, the question I want to leave for somebody here. If you work smart, if you work hard, is hard work. If you work hard, or is hard work the answer to completing and becoming who you want to be? Is success done by hard work?
Thanks for sticking around to the end of the show. If you have feedback, a suggestion, or just want to start a conversation, fire off an email to tyler@elementaleducator.com. I actually read them. And if this episode sparked something, leave a review on Apple or Spotify. It helps more leaders find the show. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, where I put out additional content. I'll see you next time, same time, same place.